Gulavanaka and welcome to For the Record. Recently, the High Court in Suva convicted a man of selling illegal DVDs. Now, this isn't the first conviction for DVD piracy, but it's one of the few successful ones that we've had. And this has brought up the issue of intellectual property rights. A very good time to have discussions about what it means, where Fiji stands in terms of piracy, and where we are moving. And to talk to us about this in studio tonight is the Head of Enforcement at the Fiji Intellectual Property Rights Office, Terence O'Neill-Joyce. And our panelist tonight is Joshua Tuere, joining us again from the Fiji Sun. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here tonight. Terence, as I had made reference, intellectual property. Now, we've just come out of a situation where a DVD shop had been selling illegal copies of the Fiji versus veteran All Blacks game, and this was the matter was actually brought up by Fiji Broadcasting, which complained that this was intellectual property and the DVD shop was breaching copyright laws. That's been dealt with by the court. The man has been sentenced, but it sort of gives an indication of the level of piracy that's going on in the country. What are you finding at the...
Well, first of all, to set the record straight, what actually happened was somebody complained about it. So a member of the public complained that this was happening in that shop, and they wanted to know how come something like that could happen. We were then aware of the situation, and I approached the CEO of FBCL. And for one of the first times, this particular, Riyadh said he was furious that somebody had come along and taken his content and not paid for it. So there's a financial cost to getting these games, an outlay, a substantial outlay that people have to put forward, just as the movie producers do. So having a complainant that was prepared to go in and enter the battle at the beginning made the whole thing a lot easier. But you still had to keep a track of it all the way along the road. They had to go to Tongo, they had to execute a search warrant, caution interview with the defendant, and all that had to go through the court process. And then a magistrate sets forward a judgment. Fortunately, it's subject to appeal. So you have 28 days to appeal. So the Director of Public Prosecutions opts to appeal. And he knows the subject matter. He knows exactly what's going on throughout the territory. Fortunately, you have a judge who is conversant with the Copyright Act. No nonsense, and he goes straight in and he just pulls the magistrate's judgment apart and overturns it. So that's where the victory comes from. The victory comes from the complainant having the guts to go forward and say, no, it's not good enough. We don't like somebody stealing our content. And you finish up with a victory.
Why do you think more people have not been forthcoming complaining about piracy? I mean, you can... Suva, Lutoka, Lambasa, you can go, there are side stalls, there are shops. Why do you think more people have not been forthcoming in addressing this issue?
Well, the interesting thing about that is that it's become habitual. You know, people collect DVDs like they collect postage stamps. It's incredible. You go into people's houses, and I've seen stacks this high. It would take them half a year to go through and watch them all. However, when we do the copyright awareness, and we went to Vanua Leva, we went to Lambasa, Seganga, Savu Sava, we've been all around Fiji. The secondary school students know exactly what's going on. They don't understand how these people are able to carry on doing it. So it becomes a question of enforcement. And the role here has got to be not just the Fiji Intellectual Property Office, it has to be law enforcement. It's a criminal act. And people don't understand that there is a 1-year sentence for the first offense. It's $5,000. And if they've got the equipment to do the burning, and most of them do, it's $50,000. That's a lot of money. So when people start talking about we can't afford to do it, well, there's enough in the mix to get enough money out of it to carry on doing it and clear it up. But is that the answer? I personally, having fought this for the last 4 or 5 years, there's got to be another solution. We have a socio-economic situation where people cannot afford to buy a new release movie. They've either got to wait until they can see it on television, or download it and watch it on YouTube, or go to the movies, and it costs them $6 to see it in the movies.
What then is the solution if Fijians can't afford new releases and piracy isn't the answer? Where do we find the balance?
Well, maybe we need to go back to the beginning. What was there at the beginning were hire, DVD hire jobs, VHS. Cassettes were hired out. That's where it started. Then, of course, the technology came along. The guy that's got a DVD library, you'll find that most of the business licenses that are issued, people don't say we're a DVD burning shop. They don't say we're a pirate shop. They say we're a DVD hire, which they're not. They're not hiring, they're selling. So going back to that is a solution, but it means more work for the shop. It means they've got to keep better records, and sure, they're going to lose some of what is hired out. They'll come back damaged, but that's, you know, if you run a hire business, you're always going to get some damage in what you're hiring out.
There's about 350 something DVDs.
Easily, but that would have been, if you asked me 6 months ago, a year ago, I'd say, yeah, 350. But we're not dealing with just DVD shops anymore. We're dealing with DVD shops and internet cafes who are becoming almost on a par with the money that's being earned, and they have got a completely different approach to it. You go in there with a flash drive, and they will. I have a particular incident where this guy had, this is 2 years ago, we're going Kings Road, and we went into the shop, and I went in and I said to this guy, have you got some local tracks? He said, yeah. And I said, how much? And he said, oh, $3 for the $3 for the 20 tracks. But before I could say what I wanted, he turned around, because he was bragging, he said, I can give you 100 tracks for $6. And he's done that onto a flash drive. And that's a little bit complicated, because if you put it onto a flash drive, you give the guy the flash drive, you're actually, in a way, you're engaging in the act. So there's a chance that if that goes to court, it will get tossed out because it's entrapment. But I jump ahead of that and say, well, that's not going to happen necessarily, because the pirate had to access the content and put it on a hard drive before he downloaded it onto somebody's flash drive. So in that stage, he can still be prosecuted.
All right, on that note, we'll have to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're talking about piracy and the problems it causes. Before the break, Terence, you were talking about how this new trend has emerged of people showing up with flash drives and downloading content. Now, so far as we've spoken about piracy, it's largely been about movies that come in from overseas. What you're talking about now has a larger impact on the local market. We're talking about local artists.
Absolutely.
Losing out on their rights.
Absolutely, and you've got situations now where people like Simon Vatalevo did his own recording. He's kept it close to home. He doesn't want to give it to anybody to distribute because he's scared stiff somebody's going to copy it. You've got Seru Serevi with a new album. You've got Lysa Volokoro, the same. And there are other people that just have recorded albums and they won't put them out because they just don't want to be pirated. And you get someone like Seru who gets really, really angry and wants to go around punching the pirates. And I'm saying that's not the answer. But it's shifted from movies. There's an attitude that's developed. If I can make some money out of it, I'll copy it. And I think that's the pirate's mindset. He doesn't care what he copies. And what's developing, the big danger in Fiji is that people don't care about copying car parts. They don't bother about copying something like this hair gel. If there's money to be made, they'll do it. So we have to develop a framework of stopping people freely ripping people off.
Just as a matter of interest, how much money are we talking about in the piracy industry in Fiji per month, for example?
Well, we know roughly now because we know exactly how many blanks are available to go to the pirates. And I gave an example of one particular pirate who could easily be clearing $1.2, $1.4 million in 4 months. Now, we've already talked about 350 and all the internet shops. You're looking at probably an industry that's worth over 20 million.
This is on an annual basis.
Yeah, and this is a cash business, and that's one of the things where I think that FIRCA, we've given information to FIRCA and they've gone around because it's a cash business. They never give you a receipt. If you ask for a receipt, you've blown your cover. They don't give you a receipt, and the bookkeeping that these people, they don't have any bookkeeping system. They burn, they sell, they burn, they sell.
So going into the future, if we are to curb piracy, why don't we just close all the DVD shops overnight, all 350 or so?
Well, you can't without prosecuting them. That's why the law is there. In a sense, the law protects them from all being closed down. You've got to go through the due process. You've got to prosecute them. In order to prosecute them, you've got to go down this track of gathering the evidence, going to court, giving them a way to defend their actions. And it's all very much weighted in a sense to allow them to carry on doing it. And that's why I would prefer to see as another solution where you get fined for infringement. I mean, what's the difference between a DVD shop that's breaking the law and a cafe that's not obeying the smoking laws, a taxi driver that doesn't have a taxi license? All around, you've got licensing systems in place.
We just don't see it as a crime. Fijians don't see it as a crime. Is that part of the problem?
Well, it is part of the problem. But how do we solve that? We solve that through education. We solve that with building this awareness program that we've got. So we start off in schools. And they understand. They understand that they have something to give to the community. And when we did these programs, we ran a poster program. And the quality of the response to copyright was amazing. It was intelligent, it was creative, emotional. So they know what the subject matter is, but by doing that, they have learned that they have got something. Sometimes people haven't realized they've got something. The guy that suddenly designed something, oh, it's worth something. I don't have a job, but I mean, give you a quick example. I used to do in New Zealand, looked after the collection agency. So 4 times a year, I would be signing a check for a local artist. And the local artist in this case was Big Ronga, who was quite popular. I would sign a check for her, and it would be for three grand. Then the government changed, and Helen Clark came in, and Helen Clark decided she would be the Minister of the Arts. And she said, national identity, we want to build a national identity. She went to the radio stations and said, you have to come to us for your frequencies next year. Well, you're not going to get your frequencies easily unless you change the amount of local content. And at that time, it was 5%. Within 5 years, Big Runga was getting $30,000, not $3,000, 4 times a year. So she actually got a living wage out of her music.
You talked about local artists like Seru Serebi, Laisapul Koro, sort of going out of their way to protect their own intellectual property and their music. Obviously, on the table, you've got an example of one trader who's actually brought a complaint about his product being duplicated or copied.
Copied, yeah.
Do you want to go into that and explain what you have on the table here?
Well, this person, this guy from Bar, first of all came, he had 4 of these, which he's done all this himself. So he's worked out a formula for gel, and people use a lot of gel here. So he had a successful business. Somebody else saw that he was being successful, so they got hold of the formula I don't know whether they got hold of the formula here or they just sent it offshore. But it went offshore and it came back in the thousands at half the price.
So this is the
This is a genuine one. No. This is a pirate one. This is the genuine because on here it says keep away from children. And the reason that's on there is really straightforward because if that's not so clear, but if you get the yellow jelly, this looks like strawberry jelly. You put your finger in there, but the concentration of caustic soda in here is high enough. If a child puts it in their mouth, it's going to seriously damage their throat.
And that's the danger of piracy now.
Yeah.
That's a new danger of piracy.
Yeah.
So why
And
is
this is not just this. Yesterday, I was in town yesterday, and there's a guy selling stuff on the just by the Triangle, and he was selling a variety of things, cheap sunglasses, socks, but he also was selling aspirin.
So why isn't this copy being stopped at our borders?
You tell me. Because how can you do that unless somebody is what the border needs is a unit to be scrutinizing what comes in much more efficiently.
All right. On that note, it's time for another break. We'll be right back.
But before we do that,
Welcome back to the show. Terence, we've been talking about piracy and the money factor, but now from what you've just explained, and you mentioned people selling aspirin on
Yeah.
the streets,
Yeah.
there is a health risk and a life risk now
Yeah.
brought about because of piracy.
because of the attitude of
Right.
not taking it seriously. And I guess the entertainment side of the business, people shrug their shoulders, they don't see any danger in it. But once you start looking at the piracy of movies, local music, you see how it damages a local industry that's trying to grow. You look at someone like the RAIN project, where Ilana Baravilala is trying to build up and mentor 10 young people, and they're going to finish up doing an album. They get popular, they're going to be burnt and sold. And they need, the whole object of doing this, Ilana's object, is to give them a position in the marketplace, but a position so they can stand up and be proud of themselves.
Hair gels that can burn a child's throat
Yeah.
and aspirin on the street sides. What
Well,
are
you
the
don't
risks
know. The thing is, you don't know whether it's aspirin. It's cheap, so people will buy it and think it's going to do the job. But it's well known globally that this is a major problem worldwide. Pharmaceuticals that are full of talcum powder and all sorts of other powders, and they're not the genuine thing. I mean, you know what happened in China with the baby formula, where a lot of, I don't know whether children actually died, but you have unscrupulous people out there. I mean, people do need to wake up to the fact this is like shark-infested waters. People are greedy, and people are greedy for money. And if you understood that global piracy 5 years ago was $4 to $5 billion worldwide, why do you think that Interpol, why do they take an interest in it? Because it's easy money for terrorists. It's easy money for the criminal. You take the case that we started talking about. Who's been penalized? The guy that was the manager in the shop. What about who's behind all this? I mean, this is a local picture, but what about Foxcatcher, 50 Shades of Grey? How come? I've been into, 4 shops, and I'm able to buy 50 Shades of Grey, and it's not released to the public as a DVD until June this year. So, and these are not DVDs that have come from somebody in a cinema with a camera. These are digital copies.
So
How come?
So is the issue here more a lack of laws or more a lack of enforcement?
No, it's not a lack of laws. The law is there, and I think it's got to do with enforcement, but it's also got to do with waking up. Waking up to the dangers and seeing that we are under threat from unscrupulous criminal minds that will do anything to make a buck.
Is it a form of organized crime?
It is organized crime. It's money laundering. I mean, I can't go into too many details because it's confidential, but the amount of money that's being made and the fact that money doesn't appear to be in the regular places, where's it gone?
Mm-hmm. You mentioned funding terrorism and Interpol's involvement. Has your department been able to trace where these DVDs are coming in from? Because earlier on, I remember, and I can possibly mention that a lot of these operators were getting their DVDs from Pakistan, sometimes India as well. But where are these coming from that are being circulating locally?
Well, the reason we were able to successfully defend the movie house case was a stroke of luck. In fact, going to see the Malaysian High Commissioner.
Movie House was a local operator that was shut down for
that was
piracy.
two in Landy and one in Lautoka.
And they sued the government.
They sued the government, yeah. But as part of defending that process, as soon as I saw the DVDs, my immediate view was that they were pirated. But it's no use. My view is no good unless we have the evidence. So there were a number of things about the DVDs that didn't ring true. They called them Blu-ray this, and they had multiple movies on one DVD, which doesn't happen with movie houses. They don't put more than 2 on there. But then somebody pointed the finger towards the Malaysian government and that they actually had an act, the Optical Disc Piracy Act of 2009. So through the High Commission, who was very, very helpful here, I got hold of a copy of the Act, and it showed quite clearly that in order to replicate DVDs in Malaysia, you have to have a SID code, which is a source identification code, which brings us to a whole other area of local music as well. So globally, the technology for replicating DVDs, Blu-ray, all of that technology is still patented and owned by. So the reason for having the SID code is to register. You have a register of all the CD plants around the world. You can pick up a CD and you can look at the SID code, and I can contact the International Federation in London. They can come back and they'll say, that was manufactured in Dublin, or it was manufactured in KL or whatever. These DVDs had no SID codes. So if they came from Malaya, and they did because we had the import documentation from customs. So that was a strong piece of evidence. And then we had Blu-ray discs, which weren't Blu-ray. Now every Blu-ray disc it's new technology, and you have to pay the patent for Blu-ray, which is the way that the people that design here get their money back.
These SID codes that you talk about, is that something that we can adopt?
Yeah, why don't I show you?
Sure. What have you got in your little bag then?
I've got lots of things in my little bag. I've got an umbrella in case it's raining when I go outside. Okay. So this is a CD that I did myself. So I was a record company. So on the middle there, you can actually see, this is an easy one to see. If you look at that, can you see the word stebbing?
Yes, I can.
And what?
IFPI P801.
That's a SID code.
Right.
Okay, and that's allocated to that plant.
And what would we have to do to adopt it here to protect local artists?
Well, you have to have a replication plant, which you don't have.
Hmm.
And what I would like to see, now I'm pushing a barrow here, but what I would like to see is no duty, nothing, and I would like to see these CDs and DVDs replicated offshore.
All right. On that note, time for another break. Good evening and welcome back. Once again to For the Record, we're talking about piracy in Fiji and what our responsibilities are as law-abiding citizens. Terence, we've spoken quite a bit about the safety measures that have been taken, the security measures that exist, and the attitude of people towards piracy. What I'd like to find out is whether there's any way that all these digital security and whatnot can be adopted under Fiji laws. Do we need to maybe adapt our laws to the current state of the world?
You don't have to adapt the law. You have to allow a practice to take place. So when the discs are made, and there is the ability to digitally embed this information in the disc. So you've always got, it's like a license plate on a car, which allows you to go back and find who the owner is. Well, the ISRC code, which is embedded in there, is a similar sort of thing. So every time you play one of these as a broadcaster, it comes up. And when you have to pay the owner, it's all there digitally. So it's done, the whole thing is almost a seamless transaction from the moment you take it, put it on FM Gold, Fiji Gold, full of international repertoire. Every time one of those is played, the information as to who needs to be paid is on that disc.
Now, remixes are quite popular and they sell very well.
Remixes, and they sell very well, providing the remix is done by the original artist.
Mm-hmm.
But when some smart aleck DJ decides that he will take a new release and he'll do a remix version, he never asks permission. That's a contravention.
Which is
That's
happening.
that's abusing the copyright.
Which is happening at the moment in Fiji.
Yeah, it's widespread. Now, if I write a poem, and in my poem I'm saying, and the sunset went down, and some character gets hold of my poem and says, and the sausage went down, you think that's silly. Well, it is silly in a way, but it completely takes away what I am trying to say with the piece of music, or what I'm trying to say with the poem. So it's an attitude, this belongs to Lysa Vulakoro or Seru Serethi or Jali Maro. It belongs to them. If you want to make an adaptation, you ask permission.
So where do artists, singers, composers, members of the public who might have useful information go to report it? Do they come to you?
You come to the Fiji Intellectual Property Office.
That's third floor Suva House in Suva.
Yeah. They can go there, and then matters can be referred to the police. And what we're trying to do at the moment is move into a closer cooperation with the police. So we're working together. There's three elements here. Customs, well, it's four elements actually. It's customs, the police, the judiciary, the public. We do the awareness to schools, but it's not just the schools. That's just secondary school students. But what about the public at large? What about all the ministries? If you take the Ministry of Itauki Affairs, are you aware of the cultural mapping that they've been doing? So they've gone out and they are building a treasure trove of all sorts of different things that have happened, which need to be protected. Now,
traditional intellectual property.
Hmm?
Traditional intellectual property.
Yeah,
We're talking about
it belongs.
Itoke
The
designs.
ownership's complicated because it's not one person. It's very often, like with the Fiji Air situation and the Masai, it's not always clear who owns, but if it's acknowledged, then the village itself, they can have a joint ownership. If they realize that this is a valuable property, then they can get it registered, they can put it down in writing, that this belongs to this village and these are all the people.
Is that part of the cultural mapping exercise to use?
Part of the cultural mapping exercise is to go out there and discover what is there. If you've got a 70-year-old nose flute player in Tailevu, well, he's a national treasure. So if they go out there and record him, that's unique. But I happen to already know the BBC did. Now, have the BBC acknowledged the copyright in that? How does that work? So it's about knowing it's yours.
Where does your office come in terms of protecting traditional intellectual property?
Well, we just try to communicate these issues with Itauke, which we've done.
Are there protections availed to these intellectual property owners, same as there would be for a singer or a dancer or a movie producer?
The first thing they have to do, if it gets fixed, they need to have information on there that says who the copyright owner is.
I'm referring to traditional intellectual
Same
property.
thing. Once it's fixed, I mean, you've actually got to put it onto something in order for it to be used somewhere else. You can't take the 70-year-old nose flute player out into the marketplace, but you can take a recording of him out into the marketplace. Now, That traditional knowledge, who does that traditional knowledge belong to? Does it belong to him? The only way you find answers to this is to go and find out, where did it all come from? How did it happen? And you can only go back so far, but you go back so far, draw a line, and then from then on there has to be ownership.
And the whole issue of things like traditional medicine, does that come into play as well?
The whole thing's the same, but you have to draw the line somewhere. And you'll find a lot of music on records, for instance. You will find compositions and it just says traditional afterwards. So no one's paying any copyright at all. Which is, it can't work any other way.
Apart from music, traditional music specifically, there are also crafts
Yeah.
and motifs,
Yeah.
which I suppose don't have traditional, intellectual property protection right now, because a lot of the handicraft shops that you go into, and I'm not just talking about the big operators, but small operators as well, the items that they sell are marketed as traditional Fijian handicrafts, but they're not necessarily made by the traditional artists themselves. They're commercially manufactured.
Yeah.
Is that a factor that you're looking at?
Well, no, but it's a factor I'm interested in, because I think it's unfair when there is a traditional instrument or a traditional tanoa that gets
mass-produced.
in Indonesia and it's sold in shops here. You're actually, in a way, you're not really telling the truth to the tourist that comes and buys it.
All right, well, and I suppose you'll be exploring this in the future as well?
Yeah, there's a huge amount to do, and a lot of it rests on education. And one thing that we haven't touched on, you mentioned the word our responsibilities. Fiji is a signatory to 2 international protocols, the Berne Convention and TRIPS. So by signing those documents, Fiji has guaranteed the protection of the IP of all those other signatories.
On that note, it's time to take a break. We'll be back shortly with our last segment. Pulamanaka, welcome back. Just about to wrap up tonight's show. Terence, let's get back to the issue of piracy of movies and the entertainment industry. As we go to air tonight, there are no licensed outlets which hire DVDs. There were some initially. They've all been shut down as a result of the operations of these 350 or so illegal operators.
No, they weren't shut down. They transferred their mode of operation to. The technology came along where it was easy for them to take the VHS cassette and just transfer it to a DVD, and then copy. Much easier to copy a DVD, a blank, than it is to copy a VHS cassette. And so the technology was presented to the pirate to make it easier.
And that led to companies that were operating legally, following the copyright laws, they had to shut down.
Well, the interesting thing is that they weren't, according to the Act, they weren't operating legally even then, because the Act says selling and hiring is an infringement. But from a practical point of view, if you want the owners of the content to try and help people get the entertainment, well, they can forego taking a prosecution against people that are hiring. There's got to be some give and take in this. I mean, the best give and take that you could have is a DVD costs, with a booklet, costs roughly $1.50 to manufacture. But then all the people that are involved in it, the only way that they get their reward is from it being sold in the marketplace, and royalties can come back. So there is a way of bringing the price down to a more acceptable level, or even selling the DVDs without the jewel boxes and without the booklets. I mean, I know that Eros bring in, they have a certain kind of disc, which is just a disc, with a very thin plastic sleeve, and they sold for, I don't know, about $3. So that's the only other area. Otherwise, you have to change the public's attitude.
How do you do that?
You tell me.
Yeah.
Why does somebody have to sit down at a weekend and watch a DVD movie about how somebody else lives somewhere else? Why can't they get outside and discover the land that they live in? Why don't they read a book? There's so many other forms of entertainment that you can key into. And you've got all these programs now through your laptop, whatever, that you can watch. And it's tied into advertising, so the content owner still gets some reward back on his content.
Well, that brings me to the next question of how this whole sector, it has become a sector of its own, it has become entrenched into society. It's become a way of life.
It has, absolutely.
And changing that is a big ask. We're not talking about changes in the next 5 years, 10 years. What are we talking about?
Well, marijuana. What's the difference between doing something about people that's smoking pot and selling it? Nobody questions that. Police go up into the hills, they pull the stuff out, they charge people. What is this if it's not some kind of drug that people have got to lose themselves in this world of entertainment? And I'm a little bit of a philosophical guy, but when you look at some of the entertainment that's put forward for people, I mean, it's just, some of it's just a load of nonsense. Is that the diet of a healthy nation? Or is building an industry in Fiji of its own people doing its creative thing? Isn't that a better answer for the public's entertainment, instead of reliance on what someone else is doing all the time?
Perhaps it's also in the way the language, how the language frames the topic. I asked you earlier about whether this was organized crime or not. And maybe if people look at it as organized crime, they might think differently. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, what is the penalty for somebody that's got a pirated DVD in their possession? There's always two sides to the coin. The person that goes in and buys, the person that corrupts is as guilty as the person that's corrupted. So the only way you're really going to stop it is, like we've already come to this full circle back again, is changing people's attitude. Why? Ask the question, medically, physiologically, why does somebody have to have a DVD to watch every weekend? Why?
It's become a way of life. And how do we change the way of life? Change attitudes.
Go and watch the rugby match.
As we wrap up, you spoke about how there needs to be more awareness and closer collaboration with the security agencies. We're talking about FIRCA and police.
Yeah.
How is that shaping up? Because as we pointed out, these items were in court at the border. The DVDs which are coming in, I don't suppose are coming in trickles, one by one, or twos and threes. It would be coming in large quantities. So why aren't these being picked up?
Well, the people that are responsible for the border have to acknowledge that maybe there is some intelligence that can be given to them that will seriously impede this. In the same way, if the police have failed to win cases and have backed off because it's become embarrassing, then maybe a liaison with somebody that's been in the business for 40 years has got the possibility of assisting to get these cases through. And the relationship at the moment, having just spoken with Assistant Commissioner Henry Brown on having such a close relationship, which will make a difference. I mean, at the moment, I can only do so much, but at a point along the track, I've got to get the police to come in. They've got to execute the warrant. They've got to do the caution interviews, and in the caution interviews, it's very often that's where the intelligence is available. The woman that was selling 50 Shades of Grey, I said to her, how on earth have you got hold of this? I said, it's not even released yet. And she said, we downloaded it off the internet. And I said, come on. And then she said, someone comes in and we buy it. And just that one sentence suddenly opened up another possibility, which has since been confirmed, that somebody who's got decent broadband width is downloading and going around and selling masters to these shops, and then they copy them. It doesn't tell you where it came from to be downloaded in the first place.
All right. With that, Terence, I have to thank you very much.
Thank you
for coming on the show. Joshua, thank you for being with us tonight. That wraps up our show. We'll be back again next Sunday. Until then, you have a safe week. And do remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can email us for the record at fbc.com.fj. Good night.